Welcome to the ServiceNow Educational Workshop. Today's topic will be optimizing app dev, leveraging the scaled Agile framework. We got a couple of great speakers here today. We are going to introduce you to Greg Wheeler, who's a practice manager, and Aretha Walker, who's a senior solutions architect. And they're going to walk you through obviously a pretty cool topic and we really want this to be interactive. So ask your questions. Please put them in chat. Obviously, you'll be muted, but put them in chat. We're going to get to those questions and we're going to ask Greg and Aretha for those, hopefully for those answers and get them right back to you. And then also, just to let you know, we're going to be having some interactive polls as well. So please participate so we can get as much out of it as possible. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to what's really about 50 years worth of experience in this category, and that's really all that needs to be said here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Greg and Aretha. You guys, it's all yours.
Anyway, yeah, so good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you're watching from and where you're located. We just want to start with two quick questions. We're not going to kill you with polls today. So what we're trying to do is get a handle on who's listening and where comfort level is. So the first question is, what is your organization's comfort level with Agile development? And that's Agile in general. Are we not doing anything Agile? Are we starting to dip our toe into the water? We're comfortable there, but we don't have any tools, or do we have, or we're fully on board with what we do? So if you guys could give an answer on that, we'll give it a couple of seconds. Team, if you can be watching to see when the responses start to slow down, then we'll close this. And so then the next question is going to be more about scaled Agile. And then during the course of the next 45, 50 minutes, we're going to talk about scaled Agile, and we're going to talk about it as a framework. And then we're going to dive in and talk about how we might do this with ServiceNow. ServiceNow actually has a pretty good application and good set of functionality behind the behind this to help you make that. So yeah, we can close this poll now and we can move on to the next question if that's okay. And so the next question that we have then is, where is scaled Agile in your journey map? So from the first one, we have some people, we have like a third of people saying that they're really involved and they have a lot of response. We have about a third of people saying that they're just getting in, but they haven't started playing with tools. And then we have a few people that are saying next. So what we're looking here is, what about scaled Agile? Is this something that's on your roadmap or not on your roadmap? Is this something that you're looking at investigating and just starting to get in, but it's out a ways, or you have it on the roadmap a little bit closer, you're in the middle of implementing, you think you're really good with this? I don't know why I have the same question twice. That must have been a typo on my part, but oh, we're maturing or we're fully mature. So yeah, if we could answer that, and so we can kind of see where people are at with this. And scaled Agile, for those of you who are just getting into it, is kind of that sweet spot between full project management and more of a disciplined approach, and full Agile, where there's a little bit more ad hoc nature to this. So yes, we can close this poll up now and we'll see what the results of that are, and then we'll move on from there. Yes, so what I'm seeing here is the majority of people, 29% are saying that they're don't even have scaled Agile on their roadmap. 38% of organizations are saying that they're just starting to investigate. So this is really kind of a good time to have this conversation, and I'm hoping we can answer some of your questions and help you along on making a decision on where to go with this. So we want to start kind of from an early part. Technology Business Management Council was talking to us about how we run our business. We all have a lot of demand on our organization, and we're trying to balance that demand between run the business and change the business. And we're trying to have a conversation with our business about where we should be spending our IT resources and where we should be applying our resources to make this happen. And I'm going to be doing, and Aretha and I are going to be doing more conversations around this value conversation in upcoming events, because this starts to become the cornerstone of how we work from an IT perspective in supporting and optimizing our return on investment for our business stakeholders. So in this one, as you can see, we're representing that a certain portion of us needs to run the business. We need to keep the lights on, keep things going the way they are. And then there's a certain portion that needs to change the business. And we can use Scaled Agile for both of these aspects of the business. So what are we looking at chipping in? What are our objectives for using something like Scaled Agile? Well, we want to stay aligned with the business. We want to, create the business is creating a business strategy for where they're moving forward. We want our IT initiatives to enable that change and to continue to support that business. We want to be adaptable. The environment changes all the time, so we want to be able to move and change and not get stuck. Sometimes with classic PMI project management, we create a project plan that's 18, 24 months long, and by the time we get to starting to deliver some of the product out of that plan, we're already past where the value add is, or we're already past that environment, and the environment started to change. So we want to be able to be adaptable and refocus as teams achieve objectives, but also as the business changes. We want to be able to be scalable. We want to be able to grow this. We want something that that we can manage as we get bigger. As IT is more and more successful, it's making the business more and more successful. As the business becomes more and more successful, we get bigger and there's more demand. So we want to be able to scale that and bring it forward. And lastly, though, we want to be able to provide consistent results. We don't want some of our results to be good and some of them to be bad. So we want to be able to have a format and a process where we know we're going to provide value back as we go. And it's kind of a balancing act, right? Different things that we're playing with here. ITIL and ITSM is talking about the consistent, reliable, repeatable way of doing things, driving towards quality and control and security. Whereas on the other side, Agile, Scaled Agile, DevOps is looking at speed to market and responding to change, interactive, self-directed teams. I think this concept within Scaled Agile kind of provides that best that best balance for this. So what we're looking at here is business, and most everything that we do drives back towards the business. We have business needs, we have business value. And so in our world, we're looking at, we have keep the lights on business, service requests and incidents, and they become incidents and not service requests, and they may become change and deployment and operations, and that's to keep the lights on. What we're talking about here today in the Scaled Agile line is this last area, this area of ideas. And ideas come into ideation demand. For those of you who are using ideation demand or are familiar with that, we're going to run through ideation demand. And what we're going to generate are epics. These are bigger, almost project-like pieces of work, and or features, new things that the product should do, and are smaller. One is more strategic in nature. One is more optimizational or continuous improvement in nature. That runs through our SDLC. We get authorization through change management and deployment, and that's how we move forward through this. Are there any questions? Anybody have any questions that have been coming up at all, Rick, so far?
There are no questions at this point.
Okay. I'm going to just stop every once in a while, and Aretha, feel free to kick in. So what is SAFE? Well, SAFE is a methodology that we're looking at that kind of breaks, that starts at a portfolio level, epics, and we take and have a backlog within that portfolio where we take those epics and we start to decide which ones we're working on in what order and how do we provide value. Then we take and we decompose those epics into features. What are the features that make up this epic? So if we have an application of a ERP system or an employee system, and then some of the features may be uh, the ability to look for leads for new employees, the ability to hire a new employee, the ability to, features related to payroll. So we're taking that employee system, Epic, and we're breaking it down into features, and that comes onto a program level backlog. So you're going to see portfolios broken into programs. And then we're going to take those features and decompose those into stories and start to plan them out over the concept of what's known as a program increment. And we're going to plan them over a set of weeks. By doing that, what we are also going to do is we're going to create something called an Agile release train, or a train, or an art. And that Agile release train is sort of a team of teams, for lack of a better word. And what that's going to do is be solely focused on working through the features and the stories in the program that they're related to, and releasing production ready code at the end of each of those pieces, new releases, basically. So it's kind of like full Agile, but it's got a little bit more structure around it with the way we put our teams together and the way we break work down into program increments. One of the values of doing that is by making sure that everybody on that team of teams stays aligned. It's a self-contained team. The more alignment you have, the more we can be self-directed teams, the more autonomy we can grant, because everybody knows which direction we're going and what we're trying to achieve. So that's one of the values that this brings, is by putting these teams together and keeping everybody rowing in the same direction. So what is an Agile release train? Well, an Agile release train, as I said, is a team of teams. And it's a continuously operating, it's not like we put it together for a project or for an epic or for a time period. Usually it's a continuously operating, long-lived entity, which includes everybody that we need to get requirements, to do design, to do build, to deliver, to release, and in some organizations also supports the operations side, sort of a DevOps type of implementation, supports the operations sides of this. And so, and this team together is supports the concept of a value stream. So now we have a value stream where work comes in one end, and through that value stream, we provide back value on the other end. As I said, it has all the cross-functional capabilities that we need. Hardware, software, firmware, all of the pieces that we need, and all of the disciplines of definition, development, implementation, testing, deploy, release, all of everything that we need as we go. And it's a continuous flow. It's a lather, rinse, repeat type of work that goes with that.
And Greg, just to point
Yes.
into that Agile release train, probably one of the biggest differences from Agile, for those who have also worked in just the Agile area, this actually encompasses, as Greg said, additional teams. So we all who have worked on projects know we usually have a project team, but that may be a core team. However, I may need additional people to work on that. So with the Agile release train, they're allowing you to bring other groups or other teams along the ride, so to speak. And that encompasses the entire team of people that it would take to create that epic feature or story.
Exactly, Aretha. Perfect. And if you notice here in this representation, we have hardware, software, quality, testing, the pieces that we would normally put on our project team, but we are also including the business. We're also including product management. It's this cross-functional agile set of teams that are working. In this representation, we even included security. We have to let them play sometimes, I would imagine, but this is what we're doing. So we have this ongoing train that is continually chugging along and turning out product, but we need to organize it into some level of work. So this is where the concept of a program increment comes in. And so a program increment is usually between, this is saying 8 to 12 weeks. I see a lot of our clients do these in quarters, so 3-month periods, which would be 12 weeks, I guess. But they can be variable in length and they don't have to be consistent all of the time, even within your organization. And with the program increment, what you're doing is you're saying over the course of whatever this program increment is, we're going to turn out a certain amount of work. We're going to turn out these features. Features should be sized and scoped in such a way that they can fit within a program increment. So if you have larger features that maybe will take full 12 weeks to build with all the pieces around them, then you'll have a larger program increment. If you have smaller features and you can get a bunch of them done in a smaller, that might be a way of doing the work. The piece with the program increment is that we're going to now plan all of the work for that increment. So we're going to take out of our backlog, we're going to break that increment into iterations, which in my world I'm calling sprints, but we're going to break it into iterations, and we're going to then plan the work across those iterations. And in the old days with post-it notes and yellow string or red string, this is what it might look like. We'd have iterations. Now, one of the things that's important to note within a program increment is that every team's iteration or every team's sprint has the same begin and end date, because this way we can start to align what we're doing across the iteration. And so if you notice, we have teams on the left side, we have iterations across the top, we have work that we're doing, features, and we have dependencies across those, both marked by bigger indicators on here, but also indicated by the strings. We're starting to put a little bit of dependency into here. We're starting to identify that in order for the story in iteration 1.2 to be done by the dolphins, we also need the iguanas to do some work, and we need the sys architectures to do some work in order for us to do that. And we start to see these. We might have some features that can just stand alone and we can put them into our planning board by themselves, or we might have things that have dependencies. And usually this is done the 2 weeks or 3 weeks before a program increment starts. And it's usually done in a big room with a lot of people in here, because we are taking the features, we're decomposing them into stories, we're understanding the scope and size of the stories, and then we are starting to understand how these pieces go together so that we can plan these out across multiple teams. So this is where it starts to break down a little bit from classic Agile, where a lot of times the teams are more independent and you're informally looking at the dependencies across actions. This is a real set of dependencies, and we're planning this out in advance. Also, when we plan out a program increment, we usually stick to the course at that point then. New features, new work that comes in, short of incidents or problems or changes, things that we weren't anticipating, will be then put into the next program increment. So we're starting to put some boundaries and some parameters around this to help us with the consistency side. But by keeping the program increments in manageable timeframes, 8 to 12 weeks, we're also keeping the adaptable times. It's not like our program increment is 18 weeks or 24 weeks. Aretha, does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Absolutely.
So what are some of the things that an Agile release train has? Well, we have a fixed schedule, right? We are doing this, we are planning it, we are setting it into place, and we are going to continue to do this. And it's not like it's going to change much in the next. If we did not get pieces into one planned program increment, it'll get put into the next program increment, and we'll move along with that. What else are we doing? Inside of the program increments, we are doing iterations, sprints, usually every 2 weeks. We have the ability to make them 3 weeks or such, but usually every 2 weeks is the way most organizations are doing that. So it's similar to what people that are doing Agile are doing now. We're synchronizing across all of the teams so that everybody is on the same set of schedules. So our program increment for all the teams in the train is the same, and the sprint begin and end dates are the same. So now we have some alignment across our teams and how they work. By doing this, we can start to understand the velocity. We get much better understanding of what the whole train can do, as well as the individual teams within the train can do. And we're having everybody dedicated within these teams. What you'll notice, especially when we start to play on the ServiceNow platform a little bit with this, is that while you can be in multiple teams, an agile team, a safe team, can only be in one agile release train. So it's not like we're moving these around. We're looking for consistency so that we can understand velocity, so we can build alignment, and we can start to understand and be able to depend on our cadence and our release. So now that we have the structure in place, we have an agile release train. We know the teams and the people that are associated with it. We know the iterations that are the program increments. And then within those program increments, we know the iterations or the sprints that are going to be aligned. How are we going to start to put our work in that? Well, we have different entities that we're going to play with. So here we have an epic. An epic is that biggest level of work that we're going to take into scaled agile. It's a container for a significant solution, is the way Scaled Agile Institute talks about it. It kind of aligns with either a system or a project. I know people are always trying to put them, what is an epic, but it is that largest section of work. And usually we are planning epics at a portfolio level. So these are the epics that, in the example that we're going to play in, that we want to do within our HR portfolio of work. These are the pieces that we want to get in place at this larger level.
Yeah, and Greg, you're right on point. This is usually the area where everybody has the most trouble of defining what an epic is, and it really is that volume of work. If we ever read a War and Peace novel, watched Star Wars, watched Lord of the Rings, right? It's that volume of work that encompasses an epic, something that is really taking a long time to come to fruition.
Right. And even the Scaled Agile Institute talks about it, they're saying epics aren't projects. A lot of people want to try to compare them, but it's not. An epic has certain characteristics that we are going to start to understand, including a concept that we'll talk about at the feature level called a weighted shortest job first. But what we're looking to do is provide progress and outputs all through the epic, building on itself and building on cycles. Whereas projects, we all understand the PMBOK, a unique piece of work with a defined beginning and end and a defined output. So there are some subtle differences between the two of these. So when we have our epics, then what we're going to do, as we talked about, is we're going to decompose those into features. So an epic can have one feature or multiple features, but a feature is a piece of functionality that we want to implement. It is something that can stand by itself. And this is one of the places that with our clients that are doing full agile, moving to scaled agile, this is one of the learning curve parts, or this is one of the pieces that we struggle with just a little bit, because really in scaled agile, the feature is the piece that we really care most about. I know we say in agile, stories represent a piece of production ready code at the end of a story process. Really, the process that we're doing here is we're implementing features, and the feature is the piece that, until all of the work that goes, all of the stories that go to enable the feature happen, we do not release any code until the feature is there. So this is one of the biggest shifts for organizations, is that we're now feature centric more than story centric.
Yeah, and to that point, Greg, one of the things that sort of helped me understand it a little bit better, any business analyst is probably familiar with gathering business requirements, right? It's that high level business requirement that makes up the feature, which then tells you, what do I need to do to deliver that feature?
Mhm. And so we're going to have a big backlog of features. And so how do we start to identify which ones give us the best value? Which are the ones that we should move? Well, in scaled agile, there is this concept of weighted shortest job first. And it's seriously, it is as simple as this equation, but we need to learn how to make it work for ourselves. So one of the big factors when this is what is the cost of delay? What is the cost if we don't do this? Or if we put this off? And that's comprised of values of what is the business value? What happens if we don't do it? Does the value decay over time? And what are the risks that we're either offsetting or trying to reduce? Or what is the opportunity that we're trying to achieve? So we take those values. It's kind of, I don't know whether any of you have ever done the estimating poker. You know, it's a Fibonacci sequence type of thing, and we're applying values. And so one of the things that when we work with clients is coming out with some consistency of how those values work. We don't want to really change the numbers or the math, but we want to say that user business value score of 1 or 3 or 6 or so on and so forth, which are the ones that make the most sense and how do we apply this consistently across. So after we get the cost of delay, we now divide that by how long the job is going to take. And so basically job size, job value, job cost. And so what that does is it gives us a metric that we can now start to compare this feature against that feature in an objective type of way so we can start to understand in our backlog which ones we're working forward with and which ones we are not. And then lastly, along these entities, we have stories. And we're all kind of familiar with stories. But in this case, the stories are the activities that need to happen in order to enable the feature. We want, again, the stories to be able to be done within a single iteration or sprint. Pretty much anybody who's doing Agile understands this concept of story, but the stories are no longer standalone entities. They need to tie to a feature, which needs to enable an epic, if that makes sense to everybody. So if this was all we were doing, this would be pretty simple, but we're going to have more than one feature against an epic, and we're going to have more than one team involved. The different color on the stories are the different teams, the agile teams that we have doing this. So it becomes a little bit more scheduling complicated, and then not only that, but we're going to have dependencies across these things. And the dependencies might not even be within a team. Some of them might be within a team, some of them might be cross-team dependencies. So we have to arrange all that. And oh yeah, by the way, usually we don't only have, 8 stories within this, but we might have 20 or 30 or 40 stories within this with dependencies across and maybe sometimes multiple dependencies back and forth across. So that's where this stuff starts to build up and become a little bit more complicated and a little bit more troublesome to work. And this is what scaled agile is going to enable us to do, is to be able to handle this in a disciplined approach.
Hey, Greg, we have a couple of questions.
Sure,
I think this would be a great time since we're on this picture.
sure.
One question is, the explanation works well when using a software development example, but how does this translate when you are an organization that usually buys and implements more off-the-shelf solutions? How do we define the epics and features, and how to break out the teams?
Sure. So this is specific to software development, but it can be used for any concept. So an epic being a larger piece. So we're a ServiceNow implementation partner. So we're buying licenses to ServiceNow. There's different features that we want to either enhance or modify or strengthen, right, along the way. Not that ServiceNow needs much strengthening, but there's features that want to do that. So for some of our SaaS solutions, if we're doing this with We have clients that are doing this with Epic if you're in the healthcare range, or we're doing this with Salesforce or such. You are still looking at breaking your work down. It's really that decomposition method that we're looking at for taking something big, decomposing it into smaller units, evaluating them for priority and for value, and then decomposing that work into what work it would take to make it happen. And you said there were
There's a
two?
second one.
Yep.
I mean, can you have a hierarchy of epics or features? The example is implementing ServiceNow. That's what they're considering the epic.
Mm-hmm.
Then CSM may be a feature. This is a question. But these various elements related to CSM, such as case, portal, incident, problem, knowledge, etc. So first question is, can you have a hierarchy of epics and features? And is that something you probably would want to do?
Yeah, I have not seen that. And in the example that you gave, I would probably have CSM being my epic. And then I may have Scaled Agile as my epic and other epics there. Uh, and then the features and such within those segments of it. ServiceNow is a platform which has applications or epics within that. So that's the way I would, that if I was giving you guidance, I would be saying that at that more granular than the whole platform level would be where I would start my epics.
Yeah, I probably would agree with you on that. I also like to point out it might also help if you kind of think about the capability that you're giving to the business when
Mm-hmm.
you are creating your epics and features, because ultimately it's that functionality. So if you're still sticking with that ServiceNow being the product, and maybe my epic is the CSM. I mean, my feature is what capability am I giving to the business by launching CSM? Or I'm going to give customers the ability to create their own cases.
Mm-hmm.
Something of that nature might help.
Correct.
Another question, Greg, is
Sure.
there program increment planning in ServiceNow as shown in your iteration breakdown slide? So I don't know if you want to go to the demo at this point in time.
We're about to get there. Yes,
There you
there
go.
is, and we will show that. Yes. So, and can you get the note of whoever put that question in, and we'll get their Venmo account and pay them for the leading question going into
Okay,
our
I
live,
got it.
okay? So, Rick, you got that down for us, sir? Yes, so
Of
we're going to go
course.
back and forth a little bit with the application and a little bit of slideware. But what we want to do is we want to talk about an agile release train and the structure and show you what that looks like. We want to talk about creating an epic from a demand. I'm going to do the creative feature and an epic from a demand. There's some neat information in there. And then we're going to create an increment for an agile release train. And we're going to show that planning board and how we work through those things as we go. So I do have a live instance of a demo instance of ServiceNow in Scaled Agile. I'm logged in as a portfolio manager right now. And if I go and look at the concept of an Agile release train, and I want to use my employee portal release train, what you're going to notice is this is the construct of a train. And what we have are certain teams. Now, again, we mentioned that if you have a team, a safe, agile team in ServiceNow, it can only belong to one train. So I'm not splitting my employee portal front end team across multiple trains. I may split people in multiple teams, but a team stays in one train. So I have these teams. We have 5 of them associated with this Agile release train. And we have actually 4 other people that are also associated with this train. And they may be business people or other people that other stakeholders that we want to be able to contribute, see what we're doing and where we go along with this. This train, this set of teams, has a backlog of features that are associated with it. So if you recall, we said we associate an epic with a portfolio, and features are associated with an Agile release train. And then I'm going to jump one of the, and I'll go back to the program increments in a minute. We have the concept of PI objectives. So what is this? What are the program increment objectives? What are the things that we're trying to achieve from an objective standpoint? Because we'll start to measure value and whether we achieved our objectives, and we'll take these objectives and we will start to allocate them across to the different program increments. So once we have this container of this train, and this train's in the HR portfolio, what we're going to do then is we're going to build program increments within that. So a program increment, as we talked about, is a time period that we're going to do planning against. And so I'm going to take this PI3 increment, and what you're going to see is that within the PI3 increment, what we've defined is that we're going to have our sprints within the increment of 2 weeks apiece, and we are going to have a planned start date and a planned end date. And the way that's generated is that the planned start date ends, the planned start date is immediately following the planned end date of the previous increment, program increment. And we decide how many, up to 8, oh, you can extend this if you really want to, up to 8 number of sprints that we want to do within this PI. So this becomes 16 weeks worth of work here. As we start to do planning, you'll also see that during this piece of work, there's the values from the weighted shortest job first. We're going to have what is our planned value, and then what is our achieved value for the business. What you'll notice then is, and you'll see it on the planning board, we're going to start to put features into this program increment. What are the things we're going to work on? Those features are going to bring along their stories into this program increment. Again, we have the same 5 safe teams, and what we have is a sprint per team now during this. So every team gets their own sprint. This is consistent with the way Agile 2.0 works. For those of you who are familiar with Agile and ServiceNow, this is consistent, so that we start to put work into a team's sprint. What you'll notice, though, is that the start and end dates for each team's sprint are the same. So these are all starting on 7/25, and then they're all starting on 8/8. So we get consistency across this Agile train as we're moving forward. Any questions, Aretha, on that piece so far?
We do have a question. Hold on here, because it's all the way at the bottom. How do you extend the number of sprints to past 8 in the program increment?
That's a configuration within the platform. We can take that one offline if you'd like.
Sure.
Most organizations are doing 12 as their max. Like I said, it's quarters. So they went to 8, and 2 is 16. That's like a bigger piece. So how do we create an epic from a demand? So for those of you who, oh, these are my demand slides, just in case I couldn't get the instance to work. So, and then the program increments conversation. So how do we do that? So we have, this is a very high level demand process, ideation demand process. And as you guys can see, and anybody who's used this, user submits an idea, that idea comes in, and we have the ability to put that into a story and put it into the backlog. One of the interesting pieces, if we go that route, if something comes in and becomes a story and we go into the backlog, is that as we're bringing it into an Agile backlog, we need to associate it with an existing feature. Because that's how we start to put things together. So during the course of this evaluation process, we would need to evaluate that associated with a feature when we put it in the backlog, so that we know how to work it and where it belongs. Then for things bigger than a story, we're going to get some evaluation from our portfolio committees of some demand management activity of fleshing out the demand. This is all up to your organizational level of work that you want to do here. And in most organizations, then we have a choice between, do I want to go a project epic path, which usually takes finance and some funding, or am I doing a feature path? So that's what we're going to look at here just very quickly with a couple of slides. So if I were to do a demand to an epic, I would be setting my category as strategic. I would be setting my type as an epic. And then when I get to the approved state, I'm going to create the epic, and it will drive to the right portfolio based on the portfolios selected in the demand. It'll generate the epic out of that. And then what you'll get is it'll go into a state of funnel, and we'll talk about the states. Actually, this is a good time to talk about the states. Epics walk through a life cycle of funnel. They're being evaluated. They're being decomposed. We're trying a funnel. We haven't looked at them yet. We go into review. Which ones do we want to start to move forward? We go to analysis. In analysis, we are decomposing them. We are putting features underneath them. We're putting at least some stub level of stories under them so we can size them and understand them a little bit. And then they go into backlog, which means we're getting ready to plan them, put them into planning and work. They go into implementation, which means that one or more of the features that are underneath them are being worked until all of the features are worked. These are usually long-lived, and then they would be done when we're completely done working on it. If we're doing a system implementation or an application, if you're doing CSM implementation, done might not be in our vocabulary for quite a while. Okay?
Hey, Greg, we do have one question.
Sure.
How do you show work over work streams?
How do I show? I will show that in a second. Okay?
Okay.
Sure. The next is how do we create a safe feature? So it's kind of the same thing. We're going strategic safe feature. We're asking it to create it. We're in the HR portfolio. We're asking it to create a safe feature. But the interesting piece here is an interceptor is going to pop up and say, which of the Agile release trains is this now associated with? Because that's what's going to put it into that Agile release trains backlog, so we know how to start to work that. It will also associate to the portfolio, but there are multiple Agile release trains within a portfolio, so this way we're drilling that back down and trying to get to the part where we're starting to understand where that falls. And then, yes, this is where we start to get to the planning board. So let's go back to the application. And so in my planning board, I have at the portfolio level, I have different features or different epics. And I know that I'm working, I've done all the analysis on my hiring application. I know I've done all the analysis on my employee portal. I can assign people to work on this. Those of you, I'm not going to go deep into some of the base functionality within ServiceNow, but those of you who work on ServiceNow routinely understand that. I can put tags on different pieces here, so I can put different labels on these. I can rename these labels to say what is this work that's being done at what level across here. The activity stream works here, so you'll be able to see and maintain the activity stream so we understand what we're doing at the epic level. You know, any of that functionality that we're used to working with is here. And there's a backlog section that said, now these are the epics that are still in my backlog with their associated weighted shortest job first for trying to prioritize that work and move it along. From the portfolio level, we're going to go to the Agile release train or the ART level, and we're going to start back. We also have a board at this level. So this board are my features. And so what am I doing? Here are all the features that we have. Again, from the funnel came from demand, or we created it directly underneath the epic. The analysis means that we are now breaking them down and making sure that all the stories are there and we have them where we need them to be. And then backlog means that they're ready to start to be scheduled and planned. When I go to my backlog, then items that were in the backlog on the board now are in this backlog here. And if you recall, we created different, we had three program increments created, the PI1, which has certain features that we worked on, PI2, which has some other features that we worked on, and PI3, which has more features that we're going to work on that are scored. And maybe we want to say, yeah, during this program increment, we also want to work on this product feature here. So once we get that, this is what we think we want to work on during this program increment. This is where that planning board comes in that someone asked, can we do what was in that picture? So what you're going to get on your planning board, and this, this can be at a feature or story level, but we usually work it at a story level. We have our teams on the left-hand side. We have stories that we have yet to put anywhere. And then we have the sprints across the top. So if I go to the PI3, which is what we're working, you'll see I have a big backlog of stories, and you'll start to see some dependency lines across here. And so this gives us the ability to do is say, hey, well, actually right now, employee portal team is full. What if I put this story here? Well, they're not full any longer, but there's a dependency to this story. And that story has a dependency to this story. So you can see we can start to get some value out of how we start to plan. So we start to understand the interdependence of our stories, where this work needs to go, as well as our capacity for our teams. And some of these stories will go cross, the dependencies will go cross multiple teams. I thought I had one in here, but I'm not seeing it. But some of these dependencies will actually start to drag across multiple teams. And so you'll have this as your planning. This is how we do our planning. And I've actually done this with CDW's tech services uses this process. And there's like a 4-day session where everything is staged and into backlog. And then we start to work across that to say, well, then how can we work this to make these pieces work? If you'll notice, this line is red because I have something scheduled that I don't have the predecessor scheduled. They become yellow if I have them both in the same sprint because they're saying, yeah, maybe you can get them both done, but maybe you can't get them done. So this starts to just give us the ability to work and plan our work as we move forward. I think that answered the big board planning, and also to me this answers the value stream. The Agile release train is my value stream. This is the work that's going across the train, and I'm also able to start to look at, from a train perspective, the value that I got back and the percent of things that I got completed. Lastly, we can come down to a team level. And that team level is going to be very similar to what you're used to in any of your other Agile. And you can do some level of sprint planning here. I don't have an open sprint for this team because I've moved ahead in time, but I can start to do some sprint planning. But usually most organizations are doing their sprint planning on the big board where that is. What you may do here, especially if you're doing DevOps, is you may set up what are known as triage boards. And so this is a triage board of portal incidents, or I might have a triage board of defects or of other work that I need to do. And what I can do is select one or multiples of these, tell it to add it to the backlog. And what it's actually going to do is when I go back to my backlog, what this has done is it's actually created a mirror record off of the incident. So I'm opening the incident record here, but at the same time, there's a story record that mirrors this. And now I can put that story record into my backlog. I can put it into a sprint. I can track its completion, and I can get some of my operations work done here. The downside of this is that if I'm planning my work and my teams are close to max capacity the way I plan them here, then adding more work into that kind of disrupts it. So what a lot of our clients will do is they'll only give capacity for 60%, 50% development, depending on what their expectation is for their teams to do development work versus operations work, and leave them some capacity space to do other work as that goes along. So we're into the last 9 minutes of this session. I do want, if there's other questions that we can open up, or if there's anything that we didn't specifically show. This was a very fast, high-level overview of how this can work and some of the pieces, kind of set to kind of wet your whistle and hopefully spawn some conversation. Are there other questions out there, Aretha or Rick?
I am not seeing any other questions. Anybody have any other questions of Greg or Aretha? Are there anything that you would like to see that they haven't shown yet?
So while we're waiting, so some of this, right? So we were providing a framework for governance, but in an agile way, and we're also interfacing with ideation demand. So we're putting our bigger governance conversation into play. We're providing a structure to prioritize work and to move things around, but to put an objective priority ranking onto it. We're showing transparency across our work. It's very clear where we are with all the pieces and how they go and where the status is, and we can work through there. What I don't have on here was we are enabling our teams then to self-manage because we're working together like that. I think this gives us enhanced agility over classical project, even hybrid project. I think this gives us a little bit more agility while still giving us more structure than pure agile. It starts to walk us towards a continuous deployment depending on how big we set our program increments up and where we're going. And what I really like is it's starting to allow us to do it allows us to do relationships across multiple teams, which pure Agile, I know in ServiceNow, if you implement the programs concept in Agile, it starts to give you that, but this gives you that basis to do this big board planning, so that we can get more consistency for our teams, even we understand what's coming and how it's coming at them.
Hey, Greg, we do have one more thing that they would like to see.
Sure.
How do you show incidents, or here's a question rather, how do you show incidents or requests to be worked across an Agile stream or as a feature?
So the way you would show incidents is you would create the triage board, and I'll just create one to show you for the team, and you would tell it incidents. I'm going to name this, and then you have the ability to go to any of the tables. So I'm going to go to my incident table here, and I'm going to put a filter on it that says that, and the assignment group is, and I'm going to do that. So that's how I created this other. I'm going to leave this one. That's how I created that other board. Let me go back to the board. That's how we created this triage board. And then what we did was when we went to the triage board and we said create, if you recall, it then created the duplicate. And then the story we can then put into a sprint. I don't have an open sprint right here, but you would then just drag that story into the sprint. It would show up on the boards. We would work it just like we're doing normal Agile sprint tracking.
One question, yep,
Yeah.
related to this one. Are those related to each other, and when one closes, the other one does as well?
It does not instantly close. You're kind of working them back and forth. You're watching this, but you have the relationship right here. You can't see one without the other. So if I update, because the tables are different and the concepts are different and where we're writing to, like I don't have additional comments here, right? So I'm not working back with the customer. I'm not doing stuff. So this is the level 2, level 3 aspect of resolving this. We still have the incident management aspect of this. This is just the technical side of it. So you're managing both, but they're related.
That is the last question I see so far.
Okay. Well, that's what we have. Those are, kind of the closing points. Like I said, I really think this is something that provides a really clean ability and is that next step in maturity from either pure Agile or pure project PMI project management. And I'm a big PMI project management fan, so I'm not discounting that at all. But I think this has a real value for a lot of organizations. So, Rick?
Excellent. Yep. Thank you, Greg. And everybody, a couple of calls to action here. One, uh, please take the time to do a survey. That's how we learn. That's how we try to get better. So please take that survey. Second, if you have any more questions or want to get into a deeper conversation, please reach out to your CDW or CDWG seller, and they will certainly bring in the ServiceNow resources necessary to discuss any of these types of conversations. Hope everybody has a great day. And again, thank you very much for investing a part of your day in us. Look forward to seeing those surveys. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.